You're already lobbying on that. Saying, no, that's not going to happen.
Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, April 27th, 2017. All managers are present, and this is the point of the meeting where we have matters from the floor. If someone wishes to address the board, they may have up to 3 minutes to speak, and we have Sarah Sutherland. So please start with your name and address, Sarah, and then go ahead.
My name is Sarah Sutherland. I'm at 4020 Drew Avenue South in Minneapolis, so I'm a resident within the Watershed District. And I want to thank you all for allowing me to come speak to you today about the environmental impacts of the secondary use of waste tires. Just as a very broad summary, we introduce nearly 300 million of car and truck tires into our waste system on an annual basis. So the result of this is these huge stockpiles of tires, which have very real and serious environmental impacts. This waste tires that has all the qualifications to be considered hazardous waste under the Federal Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. However, we needed a secondary use for this product, so it is exempt from that toxic designation. So there are 3 very common secondary uses of this product. It is readily available as landscape mulch. It's used as a fall protection on play surfaces, and it's a synthetic turf infill and also known as crumb rubber. These secondary uses are unregulated. They are sourced and derived from any available waste tire, and any manufacturer, and the material content can vary from sample to sample. In Minneapolis alone, there are 47 elementary school playgrounds that use it. The park has 8 crumb rubber fields with more planned, and countless other applications, as this material is readily available at any big box store. So there is known toxicity of this material, and the environmental impacts of the waste tires are increased with shredding or pulverizing for secondary uses. The chemicals detected in the tires material includes carcinogens, neurotoxins, respiratory, skin and eye irritants, reproductive and developmental toxins. It also contains carbon black nanotubes, which can act as asbestos in the lungs, and they also contain volatile organic compounds. So there's tons of study and effort to pay attention to the direct human impact of this material. You can see kids playing in it. Very commonly enters the body through ingestion, dermal absorption, and inhalation. But there's also continuous and permanent physical and chemical impact on our soil, our groundwater, and our surface water bodies. Here are some local examples of what is happening in our community. You can see that it's spreading away from the play areas. It's entering our storm drains. This is Burroughs Elementary School in the bottom left. See it's spreading outside of the play areas. It's mixing in the soil. This material has fine dust, and all these contaminants are leaching into our soil, and you can see that Minnehaha Creek is right there. It is definitely having an impact on our environment. And in addition to our storm system, this material comes home on your clothes. There's fine dust that gets on kids. It gets transported on the skin and clothing and enters our sanitary systems when it's washed up in showers and in our laundry systems.
Your grandkids play with it?
Yeah, and it's also a huge impact on the ambient air and soil temperature. You can see this is a parent in Duluth on a 77-degree day went out and remeasured the actual surface temperature of this material, and it measured almost 128 degrees. So what I feel is missing is a strong and clear voice speaking to the water quality and environmental impacts of these secondary uses of waste tires. So I'm bringing this work that I'm doing to MCWD today to help look at this issue from the broader environmental perspective that I feel like it demands. So I'm just opening up this idea to conversation, and I'm happy to provide any resources that I can help if anyone's interested, and I offer my time to any trusted board member or staff if they would like to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your printed materials as well. Appreciate it. Manager Miller.
I'd like to ask the attorney and staff to bring back a response to her request that we consider it a issue that we would be willing to address. Kurt says his grandkids play in Burroughs Park.
Yeah, unfortunately. Well, no more though.
Yeah, they used to play in Burroughs Park. Because, you know, it seems to me that it's a pretty simple solution. Is not used, you know, if we outlaw smoking in Edina, if you're under 20, or you can't purchase smokes in Edina if you're 21, unless you're 21. Seems like little kids should be better protected in public spaces, and especially if we got a right to be involved in the issue if it affects the water quality. So, I so move.
Second?
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Approval of the agenda. I'd like to add one item under 8.1, an update from Manager Shackleton on Hiawatha Golf Course. Are there any other additions or changes to the agenda? With that change, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Almost forgot that part. On our consent agenda this evening, we have approval of the minutes of the April 13th, 2017 board meeting. We have approval of the check register, the general checking account, the surety account, and the 325 Blake Road checking account, and two other items, two resolutions. 17030, authorization to execute the development of the Shuts Lake phosphorus budget, and 17.032, authorization to accept tort liability limits.
I got a question
Mhm.
on 325 Lake Road checking account. There's nothing there, is there? I mean, I don't see any checking account for 325. We don't sign checks for it.
Perhaps we should label it something different?
I don't know what it is.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Manager Miller, typically the minutes reflect that you acknowledge and accept the receipt of that register, but you don't. We previously adopted resolutions that authorize disbursement from that account, so you aren't actually approving that register. So I think we normally would either present it differently in the agenda, so that the minutes reflect that it's acceptance of this report about the account.
Okay.
Yes.
Just one other point of clarification, that's the account that our subcontractors that manage.
I understand that,
Okay.
but you know, we're approving it. I never saw it, and so
That's an interesting point, because it said this as long as I can remember.
yeah, I know.
Checking account.
But it just
Yeah.
struck me that, you know, we don't have surety checks very often, so.
Well,
But
I'll look at future agendas
okay.
with a
There
clarification.
is an attachment from LaSalle.
Yeah, it's in the packet, item 6.3, and it has the register of all the expenditures from that account.
That's not a checking. That's not a check register, is it?
It's titled check register from CBRE standard,
Okay,
Lake
fine.
Road building.
All right. Stand corrected.
Mr. Smith,
Madam President, on a different item on the consent agenda.
certainly.
The resolution 17-030, authorization to execute development of the Shuts Lake phosphorus project.
Mhm.
My understanding is that this, I think, is authorizing scope of work for Wayne to actually do this work. And I just recommend that we adjust the resolution to say that rather than executing the development of the project.
Okay, will you say it again?
So we revised resolution to read, therefore be resolved that the Board of Managers hereby authorizes the district administrator to issue a task order to Plank Associates to prepare the Shuts Lake phosphorus project for a cost not to exceed $11,802.
Does that meet with the staff agree? That was Kelly's, isn't it? Ms.
I
Dooley's.
believe it does.
Thank you. So, with those changes, are we ready to accept the agenda? Did I get a motion? I can't remember. Yes, I did.
I move adoption with those changes.
Manager Shekelton moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Manager Olson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Under board and committee updates, I have several items I'd like to mention. The first is that we have some dates we can use for our tour with the CAC, and I'd like to do just a quick poll and see if we can choose one right now and save having to send out an email. The possible dates that staff have identified are Wednesday, May 31st, Thursday, June 1st, Wednesday, June 14th, and Thursday, June 15th. But a comment about the 14th is that is the current CAC night. So Darren Lochner will be checking with the CAC about their preferences, whether they would like to tour that evening.
Any of the teens, I'm out of town,
No teens for Bill, okay.
of June.
Any other dates we should block off? Very well, then.
31st would be difficult for me.
31st is tough.
First would be better.
So the preferred date, Mr. Erdahl, would be June 1st, and the 31st is possible, but not wonderful.
Both work.
Choice June 1st, second choice.
I think that's right, yep, the 31st. Thanks.
Is it May 31st?
May, mhm,
Okay.
yep. Good, then staff will be putting together a route for that tour. I'd like to encourage all managers to attend our policy makers meeting at St. Mary's on May 4th. And we also received an invitation to a retirement party for CAP Region manager Mike Tinas, who's leaving after 18 years. And I think they said he's been there since the CAP Region was founded, so that's a fun thing. May 3rd, and I could forward that invitation if no one else received it. I don't know who got it.
I can.
You did get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll forward it anyway, just to be sure. And then I attended Metro Mod last week, but Manager Olson was also there, and I'm hoping that he will carry the weight of that report.
I would be glad to. We had a lot of issues covered, and from stormwater GIS project updates and NPCA updates, and but one of the things that I'd like to actually highlight is the summer tour and the interest on the board level to attend the summer tour. And Perry's here tonight to talk about that, so if we could have him encourage us. I am definitely going, and you're definitely
I'll go,
going.
yeah.
There are some critical votes and decisions that have to be made, and they have to have a quorum, and they have to have a lot of attendance. So it's critical that we send 2 people who vote, plus a backup if something were to happen, so as an alternate.
When and where is it?
It's really in a nice place this year. It's going to be up touring the Chippewa National Forest area. So Leech Lake and Winnie, and the meeting's actually going to be in Bemidji. And
It's the last Thursday and Friday of June.
right, so it's June 21 to the 23rd.
I could be the alternate Thursday.
Well,
person.
I think we can,
Second to last Thursday.
Second to last.
okay, thank you. Let's come back to that later after we've talked about the issues that are there. But I like the idea of doing a little vote here to see if we had enough people who were going to sign up for it. That's good.
Good. So there's half the battle. And anyway, we had updates from Bowser and the DNR, and it was a really good meeting that lasted right to the deadline. So,
Thank you.
and the Capital Region group is going to be moving to their new building eventually. Yeah, they're going to have a lot more space and able to do some demonstration work and things like that. So.
I didn't hear. I heard it described as a warehouse. That's all I heard. Do you know, Perry, where they're going?
It's a warehouse that they're
redeveloping. There's been a couple of stories in the newspapers about the work they're doing. Good for them. It's better than a sterile office park, which we've moved to, but that's a different story.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Manager Shackleton, the Hiawatha Golf Course.
Sure, so last week, Mr. Whisker, Mr. Heyman, and I went to the Lake Nokomis Rec Center, and this was maybe the 4th or 5th community meeting, and it was what has been a just contentious set of meetings about whether or not to keep a golf course, whether or not to put in a food forest, which a bunch of neighborhood activists have been pushing for, kind of came to a head last week, and it was great. You saw these golfers coming in girded for war, and these environmentalists coming in ready to just, they sat us, yes, forge. They sat everybody down in circular chairs with like a play school map of the parcel of land with like a perfectly round circle to represent the lake and polygons to represent high ground and the creek and the stormwater pipe, and said, figure out what the best community space would be for this. And my group ended with this classic golfer saying, I got a 9-hole golf course here. I can't fit this on this. We'll just put it over here. And he put it off to the side. And this guy who'd been advocating for a food forest said, well, I've got a driving range. That could fit. And he put it down. And the park board, Minneapolis Park Board, actually structured a community engagement session where people that were just at loggerheads, aggressively at loggerheads, kind of came together and problem solved how to use a public space. And I've got to tell you, I left that thing just thinking, oh my God, this could actually work. Like the park board could actually come up with a concept that benefits multiple users and multiple purposes. And so it was a really, I was really kind of heartened when I left last Thursday night. So.
That sounds terrific. Thank you.
That you're presuming that the Board of Commissioners aren't going to have anything to say about it?
I was just happy to see them diffuse a really tense situation, and the park board planners had clearly put thought into how to ratchet things down, and the process was less about how specifically to use the site, but more what kind of goals should the park board staff use as they're thinking about how to use the parcel. And so while there were cards for 9-hole golf course and 18-hole driving range, there are also cards for a skate park, a path through the lake, a path around the lake, and there are a whole series of cards. It was less minutia and more big picture. By dealing with the minutia.
Great step forward.
Yeah, that was my takeaway.
Thank you for the report. Appreciate it. Our upcoming meeting schedule is printed in the agenda. We have our first item here for consideration is Ms. Brown, Resolution 17-031, Carver Park Water Management Organization boundary change.
Thank you, President White. It might take me 1 minute to get this booted up.
Okay.
Oh, never mind. So before you tonight, you have a resolution of support for a boundary adjustment between Carver County Water Management Organization and Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. And they're simultaneously pursuing a boundary adjustment with Riley Purgatory, but it only applies to the boundary between Riley Purgatory and Carver County WMO. So if I think Riley Purgatory is in fact going to initiate a boundary adjustment with us, but that'll be a separate process. The boundary adjustment is timely. It hasn't been updated since 1967. So as you can imagine, since it was last updated, our ability to understand where water moves in the landscape has really improved. And there also has been a lot of land use change that has resulted in the subdivision of parcels. So where there once might have been a very large parcel that maybe spanned the boundary, there are situations where that's subdivided, so now we can just more accurately delineate which watershed those fall into. The process for updating the boundaries is outlined in both statutes 103B and 103D, and I've given a summary in my request for board action. Essentially, Carver County WMO has initiated the process. So they are pursuing a petition to the Board of Water and Soil Resources. So to move forward with that petition, they're seeking resolutions of support from all of the local government units and watershed districts that are affected by this boundary adjustment. And then before acting on the petition, Bowser will publish a notice about the proposed boundary change, and if there is a request for public hearing, it will be held. Otherwise, they may administratively approve the boundary adjustment. So we've been sort of working with WMO staff for some time now on this. I first met with them back in February of 2016 with the WMO and the other LGUs that are affected, and they produced at that time draft maps, this map that you see before you, and solicited public comment or comment from the LGUs on the proposed boundary change. So we had the district engineer review the boundary adjustment, and we particularly leaned on the City of Victoria engineer to make sure that the boundary adjustment was accurately reflecting the sewer sheds of some of the neighborhoods that have developed right around the boundary there. And then we also presented the proposed map on February 18th at the Planning and Policy Committee. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the map here. Let's see. Just add on the hydrologic boundary so you can see it better. So essentially what the WMO did here was, so the red is the hydrologic boundary, the gray is the current district boundary, the legal boundary. They basically ran this as a GIS exercise and looked at every parcel that intersects with that hydrologic boundary, and if it was greater than 50% in the watershed district, it comes to the watershed district. If it's less than 50%, it goes to the water management organization, Carver County WMO, with the exception of in these neighborhoods in Victoria, you know, where there are some properties here where the sewer shed would put it in one or the other. So the net impact is 271 parcels go to the Carver County WMO, but as you can see in the map, it's almost all these sort of, the number is disproportionate because of all these small kind of single family homes. There aren't very many large tracts that are really going to the WMO. And we did sort of a brief look at the net tax impact, and it's very minimal. It's less than 0.1% of the budget. And there are really no...
Less than 0.1.
0.1. Mm-hmm. And there's really no... it doesn't really impact any of our sort of major sensitive areas or water bodies of concern. The one area that we'll continue to track with the WMO moving forward is this area south of Marsh Lake Road here. Marsh Lake is a natural resource lake. It's one that is a high priority to preserve within the broader 6 Mile Halstead Bay work that we're doing. So when, and this is all a single landowner, so when this does develop, it's possible that we'll have tracts developing where they're sort of partially in the WMO and partially in the district. And we've had discussions with the WMO to just make sure that we are coordinating as those developments come up and make sure that we have a good approach for handling that. The WMO sits on our 6 Mile Halstead Bay Planning Committee. we have been working more and more closely with them on a number of issues that kind of cross boundaries. So I think that we have a good working relationship and good framework when that does happen.
Given the development pressures out here, is it worth revisiting this annually with the theory that as development happens, these parcels will be continually subdivided and we can get better refinement of taxing authority?
Yeah, Manager Shackleton, we have talked with the WMO about through the petition process if they can sort of suggest to Bowser that we have some ability to revisit the boundary in a more flexible way. Because right now it will sort of default to, you know, if this parcel in the WMO develops, it'll all go to the WMO, even if some of those parcels end up draining to Marsh Lake. So we are going to see through Bowser if there's some way of creating kind of an administrative approval process to make this a little easier, so that we don't, you know, rather than do it every 40 or 50 years when things have just really kind of fallen out of whack. So we'll be seeing if there's something we can do there.
Thank you.
I don't want to cut you off if you're ready
No,
for us.
please, yes,
Okay.
yes, go ahead.
Is there a motion to approve?
So,
Brian Major,
Second.
second. Manager Olson, question?
How many instances of surface going one way and sewer shed going the other way do we have?
Manager Olson, I don't know about the count. I mean, you can see sort of in the map that there are few. You know, you can sort of see in the neighborhood up here. There's a couple there, but it's not a lot.
Okay. So you're satisfied that this red line is more accurate than what we had before?
Manager Olson, very, very much so, yes.
Thank you.
Manager Becker?
Have you analyzed these to see if there are any liabilities or responsibilities we're giving up?
Manager Becker, not in particular, no.
Such as easements?
Yeah, we did not. We can take a closer look at that before, you know, we issue the letter to them.
I would appreciate that.
Did I see a hand up? No. Other questions for Ms. Brown? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, we'll ask Manager Perry Forster of Riley Purgatory to come speak about the mod business of the summer
I'm glad you know
meeting.
what you're doing here, because this is a machine.
And let me say Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District. That's giving you a shortcut name.
RPB CWD.
You've now got the alphabet covered.
Oh, no. You'll be really thrilled with the alphabet by the time I'm done with this. First of all, I want to thank President White for inviting me here tonight to talk about this. We began this process in November. Actually, it started before this, but in November and December of 2015, a strategic planning committee was formed by MAUD. Before that, there was a transition committee, but the transition committee, quite frankly, didn't do anything. And we got wind of the fact that Ray Bone was thinking, who was our administrator and lobbyist, was planning on retiring, and somebody said, gee, we better figure out what we're going to do here, because we could be left holding a bag and not a lot in it. And so we set up a strategic planning committee at the 2015 annual meeting. I and Craig Leeser were named co-chairs of the strategic planning committee. We did a survey with the managers and administrators of the watershed district, and in doing that, we found that there was a definite desire on the part of the a whole organization to have what we would call a full-time administrator. And we were also looking at a lobbyist at the same time. What we really discovered was the way the organization was working, it was not working very well. And what we saw is a desire for a lot more education on part of both managers and administrators. I have to tell you that some people were really shocked at that. Why do they need more? I thought this is really not very good. I think it really is important that we do this. But beyond that, it was just the idea. We asked them how much service they saw themselves getting from the executive part of the watershed district, MAUD. And I can tell you, no one said they were getting too much service. And in fact, you chuckle. Was about 2/3 of the people said they didn't think they were getting enough service. So at that point, there was a message that we really needed to take a look at and change things. So then we began to develop the strategic plan with the emphasis of getting a full-time administrator, and then really embarking on a bunch of different activities, such as really developing education programs and some other things. And I will also tell you, and then I'll get into the presentation, that I was always uncomfortable about the fact that I don't think people knew what a watershed district was. And it really rang home with me one day when I was talking to our administrator, Dr. Claire Blazer, that she had gone to the legislative breakfast. And after the legislative breakfast, she went to visit with some of the legislators from this area. She went into the office of one of them, and he said, well, tell me, what does a watershed district do? And that kind of is a message that they really don't know. And if you take a look at it right now, if you look at what's going on right now from the legislative point of view, you don't see much mention of watershed districts at all. And if money is getting allocated, it seems to be going to SWCDs and Bowsers, and very little of the money is going to watershed districts. And we really need some of that money as well, because we have buffer issues as much as SWCDs do, but we're not getting the money. And if you go talk to the people at Hennepin County, there is no SWCD. So we say to them, well, what are you going to do about the buffer issue? And they say, well, they're going to throw it back to Bowser. Well, I don't know that that's the best thing to do. So with that, let me tell you about some of our proposed bylaws, manual, and policy change to give you a little background here. I hope this works. Oh my gosh, it does. Good. So I've done some of these things, and I'll tell you some of the steps that we follow. Oh, I forgot. You want a hand? Oh, hold on. I have some handouts here. There's a mistake on one sheet, and I'll tell you about it when we get there. Anyway, we at our meeting in March of 2017, that's the legislative breakfast, we really got the transition committee going. We have a job description for the persons that ultimately are going to replace Ray Bone. Now I would tell you, the drop dead date for Ray as our administrator is December 31, 2017. He will lobby for us during the 2018 legislative session, but he's done as the administrator at that time. I want to emphasize that. But, you know, it's like everything else. When you go to make one move, it's not really one move. There are a lot of moves that have to be made. When doing this, we really thought, you know, this is a good time to review and revise the MAUD bylaws, because the MAUD bylaws really have not been reviewed for a long period of time. I can tell you that the last time there was an amendment in the MAUD bylaws was 2009. So we thought we better do that. And in the process of looking at the bylaws, we then decided there were things within the bylaws that really shouldn't be in the bylaws, because then the only time you can amend the bylaws is at the annual meeting. So we then said maybe we should move it out, and we then developed what we called the Manual of Policies and Procedures. Here's another alphabet name for you. It's called MOP, and it's going to assist MAUD in maintaining a consistent yet innovative approach to it. And at the same time, we then said, well, we might want to start out now and start looking at revising how we do the budget process, how we raise dues, and a number of other things. And one of the things that we decided was that waiting until the 31st of December of a particular year, or excuse me, 30th of November, and that about to change the financial things was not good. So we shoved the fiscal year back 1 month, so now it's going to end the September 30th as opposed to October 31, just to give us more time from a budget planning point of view. So those are some of the things that have been happening. With that, let me go through some of the specific stages. What we did with the bylaws. The first thing we did was take the dues calculations, which were in the bylaws, and move them to MOP. The main reason for doing that is the only time we could change the dues was in an annual meeting. And as I said, they hadn't been changed since 2009. We also clarified what an associate member would be within MOD, and we'll talk about that again in a minute. In the current bylaws, there's a provision for proxy voting. When the new bylaws are adopted, assuming they're adopted in June, we're going to get rid of proxy voting. But proxy voting will be available for June. And the reason, and it's just the way it's going to work out, and after that we won't have it. The list of organizations was transferred to the MOP, and standing committees was revised and then moved to MOP. And we did a lot of work on revising what the tasks of the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer were, and moved that. We defined what a chapter was, and the functions and procedures for both resolutions and petitions were clarified. We moved that into the MOP as well. And finally, an extension of attachments of prior revisions were all moved to MOP so that the bylaws were very simple and they didn't have to be changed that often. So that was part of it. So then we moved to the MOP. And what we did is do a better job of defining the membership requirements. And even every properly established watershed district is eligible to become a member. We have roughly 43 members at this time. We really want to get out and get some more because there are more watersheds than that and we want to get them involved. And I think one of the things that we want to sell them on is there are benefits to joining us so we can work on that kind of basis. And the requirement of paying dues in a timely manner was clarified. Actual membership was listed. The officers were clearly defined. The standing committees, I've talked about that. We talked about the standing of associate members. We have a push on hand to get some associate members. And we think that some of the WMOs, such as the Carver WMO or Bassett Creek WMO or the Mississippi WMO, some of them might be interested in joining us because they could benefit from some of the things that we look at doing going down the road. Dues to the organization, we really worked hard on that, and we've come up with some new formulas to do it. And one of the reasons to do it is we need more revenue so we can afford to pay for an administrator and really get going. And the other two are kind of housekeeping. We've always authorized employees, but now we define the elements of the employee agreement. And we also refined what was a resolution, what was a petition. So that's all part of MOP. Budget. As I said, we're going to change the fiscal year from October 31 to September 30. That's going to make it look a little deceiving in 2017 because it's only going to be an 11-month fiscal year. So it looks like we're going to be operating below forecast, but we'll work that out. As I said, we remain obligated for Ray for lobbying efforts through the termination of the 2018 legislative session. So those costs are fixed for 6 months. That would be from October 1, 2017 to April 30, 2018.
Why 6 months?
Pardon?
Why ended April 30th and not May 30th? I only asked it because of the legislature.
Yeah, you're right. And as I read that, I'm not quite sure that. I didn't write this page. Somebody else did.
I apologize. Yep.
That's all right. No, because I sat there and I thought, why did we just say May 30th? Because I know this year the drop dead date is May 22nd or something like that. And then as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, what about a special session? We never know. Anyway, we do have a job description for a new administrator, but we haven't hired that person yet. And in fact, we cannot start out to hire that person until we get approval for these things at the June meeting. So that's one reason why. But when we do, we're going to be obligated to assume some additional costs and all of the perks that go along with it. We're going to have to find office space and maybe acquire some office equipment, and we're having options that are going to be explored. I'm meeting next Tuesday with 2 other people, and we're going to put down a requirement list. We were going to go out and look at property or possible places because we have some in mind, but then we decided maybe we should hire the person first and get their input as to what they want or not and not force something on them, so we did that. And when we get to the budget here, which is our next slide, these are our best estimates. I mean, we really don't know, and we'll kind of firm them up a little bit, what we're going to have is going forward. With that, I'll move to the budget, and here's, you don't have this quite on the page because I stupidly left the first column off, which says what the sources of the revenue were, you'll see that for 2018, we're estimating roughly $327,000 in terms of revenue. The bulk of that is going to come from dues, $225,000. Interest, pittance that it is going to fall because we've moved money around so we don't have quite so much in certain places. We do take in roughly $47,500 as revenue from our annual meeting, and then there are expenses. Some are 2 or 17.5. And you go down there and you'll see that we're estimating in 2018, which will be the first year of this new situation, that we'll have income of roughly $326,000 to $327,000. So expenditures, a long list of expenditures. Right at the top of the list is that right now we're looking at an expense of $90,000 for the administrator. We'll see how that goes. You'll see that we have expenditures for communications, lobbying, education, a number of other items. Benefits for those salaries employees is another 30. Anyway, when you go when you go down the page and you get to the bottom of the page, you'll see that we're estimating expenditures for next year of $330,200. Now, if you remember the previous page that says what we're going to have is a bit of a deficit of roughly $3,600 in 2018. However, we do have a fairly large cash base that we haven't tapped, and if we have to, we will tap into some of the money that's there from previous years that we can go forward with so that we can continue with this. So here's where we're at in terms of what we want to do. And we know that if we can break even in 2018, I think we'll all be very happy about it because that's where we are going forward. The next page, and I apologize this, and that's why you've kind of got it in there, this is lice type. This shows the watershed district. If you go to column 5, it says 7,500 maximum. And you will see Minnehaha Creek is at the top of it, all the way down through us. And that's where we get our estimate of roughly 225, I guess it's 200 and some $1,000 there in terms of what we would get in terms of revenue. So that's what we are estimating. Sherry heard me make the speech the other night. It's quite true that the metro watershed districts, for the most part, are going to have to bear the brunt of this increase. But I personally feel that we are also going to reap the greatest benefit of it, and I think it's really important that we go forward and we've got to do these things. We can't. This is my belief, and I've said this at the board, so we can't continue to work the way we are now. We simply have to get better, and the only way we're going to get better is to change things and spend some money and really get going forward. So I want to do that. So from a summary point of view, we've begun the transition. The next important event is a special meeting that's going to take place on June 21 as part of the summer tour. Why is that important? We need to get a full quorum. We need to get a quorum of members at that meeting. Because, we need that quorum to pass changing the bylaws, to approve the MOP, and to approve a dues increase, which then sets in the process of going forward and hiring an administrator. The reality of the situation, if we don't succeed at that, I think I've said here, we're really up the creek without a paddle, and I don't know what we're going to do. We have to go back to ground zero. Each watershed will receive a mailing calling for the special meeting. I believe the mail-out date is May 10. The bylaws prescribe when it has to, the first date it can get out and the last date it can get out. You're entitled to votes just as you have at the annual meeting, so every watershed district has 2, and it would be ideal if you had an alternate coming with you, and if you can't get your 2 people, then work out a way to do a proxy so that we can have people. Thank you. I think it's really critical that we get these items passed. I mean, I have to admit I've worked hard on this. I have both a functional and emotional attachment of wanting to make MOD better. I said earlier, I don't think people know what MOD is. We can be better, and I think we can be a dominant organization going forward in helping get the water the clean water in the state of Minnesota, which is important to all of us. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. Manager Miller.
I'm not familiar with these statewide groups, but you're going to have an executive director and a lobbyist both.
Mhm.
Wouldn't one function as both? I mean, it's
down the road-
not a big staff or anything for an administrator
Well,
to.
Actually, I think that the administrative, where we're really underserving now is from an administrative point of view. You raise a good question. The lobbyist really functions from January to April or May. But what we haven't seen it work well on other parts of the year, and frankly, it's partly because of the person we have now. He likes to lobby. He doesn't really want to be a full-time administrator. So what we really want to do is get a full-time administrator and then explore down the road a possible other person to be a part-time lobbyist with us. The other thing is, this is my personal feeling, sometimes lobbyists get there for so long that the particular lobbyist is there, they see him coming and they know what he's going to say or she would say, and take off and run. I think a new person may bring a new message and perhaps do some other things for us to have us going forward. So that's another reason for it.
Who did this strategic plan?
I did. I was part of it. I shouldn't say that. I did the survey. The strategic plan was written by a subcommittee of MAUG. Craig Lesser, myself, Barb Hockey, a member from Capital City, Mary Texer was on it. It was spread out. We had, I don't remember all the people, and I don't want to name everybody because we had Dwayne Willenbring, he's from around the St. Cloud area, and other people. It was strategic plan was written by members of the board.
There's like hundreds of these organizations that come together, and you know, there's companies that run these organizations, and you know, represent suburban mayors and
Yep.
you know, all kinds of other interests, economic development interests, and so on. And they run the annual meetings and they do the lobbying and all that kind of stuff. Did you explore at all a contract?
We did, and we really ran into some resistance from some board members, or some actually not board members, but members of some watershed districts. The most logical organization that we would think of merging up with was the SWCD, Soil Water Service.
No, I'm talking about you know, XYZ consulting company.
Well, let me tell you, my background.
Why don't you let me finish?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Because I'm not really sure where I'm going, so. You know,
Okay.
So before you
Tell us
give
when
an
you get
intelligent
there.
answer to my messy question.
That's all right.
You know, they represent, you know, the Rural Bar Owners Association, you know, all these other kinds of, and they seem to, I haven't lobbied for a few years, but they seem to do a really good job of professionally representing their groups and running the organization. It rather than set up a whole new structure, it seems it would make more sense to contract with somebody that has all these lobbying and organizational management skills.
Well, you know, I guess I look at it this way. We have 43 watershed districts. We're a dominant factor within the metro area. We're a dominant factor certainly along the Red River Valley and doing some of these things. So there is the makings of a good statewide organization there. Let's just say we haven't taken advantage of what the strengths we have are. As far as to how we put this plan together, my background is marketing research, strategic planning. And so you could have gone and you could have hired an outside organization to do it, and they would have cost us a lot of money. Frankly, I don't think it would have been much better than what we've got now. I really think that the people we have working are enthused about what we have, and we really want to go forward on that kind of basis. We just have to be better, because we're spending money now, and we're just not getting a good bang for the buck. So that's where we're going.
Thank you. Manager Shackleton?
So my background is, for 4 years I worked at the legislature where I was the committee administrator for the State Government Finance Committee, and for a couple of years
Okay.
I ran the Ways and Means Committee. Contemporaneously, I was on this watershed board.
Yeah.
And I was very clear with how I operated. Things that happened in the Capitol was my day job. This I did for fun in the evening, and I didn't let things mix. But I worked with lobbyists day in, day out. And when negotiations came down and issues percolated up, the MAUD was poorly represented.
Thank you.
And the real issue is when you represent ATV Association, the Allied Charities, the Minnesota Motorcycle Riders, the Minnesota Biofuels, the National Fire Sprinkler Association, and the Workers' Compensation Reinsurance Association, you're spread thin.
You're right.
And MAUD literally only has one lobbyist. Ray does have help from John, and Lydia was helping for a while as well, but Peg was not at the Capitol, and it was all Ray, and when things were hitting the fan, MAUD's position was never raised to the fore. I think what Dick is talking about is, I can think of a couple different organizations where the model, like, we currently use one model where we retain one guy and he's kind of farming things out to his family. There are some associations that they retain one person who works for a firm, and the organization gets access to the services of the firm, which changes the cost structure. And obviously this is out the door, and this is the model that's being sold right now. And it's a model that might have a different cost structure. The other piece in this budget is there's a line item for a lobbyist, and I don't know where, I don't know.
Don't hold back, because
No. Ray is at the Capitol, and he is there day in, day out. If MAUD retains an administrator or an executive director or whatever the title is, I agree with Dick. There's a real role for that person to kind of step up and take on the responsibilities. And I get that it's the second year in the biennium. Given the service we've received from Ray, I don't know that we'd be losing a lot by having somebody else take on the roles as the primary lobbyist.
And
I'm just reinforcing your point.
I agree with you. We kind of have to. It's kind of a stage. We got to crawl. We got to crawl before we walk, and we got to walk before we run. This is an interim stage. I really envision what I envision in my mind, but I'm like everybody else here. We're subject to the fact that the counties could say tomorrow you're done, and it goes off in a different direction. Frankly, what I envision in my mind is I would like to see a full-time administrator and a part-time lobbyist, and during the legislative session, we may have 2 people over there, and we may be able to get some presence then. And I agree with you. I've struggled with this for a period of time. I've been on the watershed, my own watershed, Raleigh Purgatory. I was on it from '92 to 2005. I took a hiatus. I went to England for a while, worked over there, came back, didn't think I'd get back on, and then I got back involved in the watershed business in 2009. So I've been on it a long time. I've seen what's good and what's bad, and we're just not getting our fair share over there, and we've got to. I will give you an anecdote. This year, we had 3 items that we wanted to get approved by the legislature. One was to raise the per diem of watershed managers to $100 a day. Now, this is not a big deal perhaps for the Twin Cities, But if you talk to the people out in the counties bordering on the Red River, they have all-day meetings. And they have to drive a long distance to get to those meetings. And some of those managers are saying, it's cheaper for me to stay home than go be a watershed manager because I have to hire somebody to come and take care of my farm property while I'm gone. So we wanted to raise the per diem to $100 a day. The second thing we wanted to do is that outstate, they are still limited on the raising of money. They have the cap. They're limited by the cap. We wanted to get the cap taken off. The third was we wanted it to be so that if somebody was out down in Florida for the winter, they could still participate in the meeting on an electronic basis, which watershed districts aren't able to do at this time. 3 simple items. We wanted to put it together in one bill to get it passed. I didn't think it was a big deal. But apparently we couldn't find a legislator that would even support it. And I don't know whether it was the attitude of the legislators or we just didn't sell it properly. So that tells me we've got a problem and we've got to work over this thing to do it better. So, in fact, I had a long talk with Ray the other night at the Metro Mod meeting saying, I think there's going to be a special session. Is there any way you can kind of sneak that thing in the special session? And he didn't even want to touch it. But I'm trying to look out for what I think is best for the watershed districts in the state of Minnesota. Do the best I can.
Was it not a mod position?
What,
Those 3 points?
Yeah.
You didn't want to touch it?
Mod wants to touch it, but we couldn't get a legislator to touch it. We wrote a bill. We had to get a bill passed.
You know, if I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert, but if a lobbyist can't get somebody just to introduce a bill,
Your
you know,
point's
whether
well
it gets
taken.
whether it gets a hearing or not, you know,
Two different.
I mean, you know.
Yeah, you're right. And
Doesn't sound
I
like
have
they
to
even
tell
made it
you,
into the lobby.
I have to tell you that the one watershed district that really wanted to get their cap raised from 250 were really upset because they had their own legislator lined up to do this. And they backed off because they thought Ray was going to get the bill introduced. And the bill never got introduced, and then they got left holding the bag. And so there's where we're at. Kurt?
Manager Robbins.
Yeah, I am under the impression that we have yet another lobbyist that we contract with.
We do.
Our own.
Yeah,
Your
for
own,
just
your
us,
own.
yeah.
We don't.
Well,
Robbie
that's a-
Purgatory
that's
doesn't
a-
have a lobbyist.
That's a redundancy that do we really need that?
Yes.
Yeah.
We need our
Anyway.
own.
We do, yeah.
We have a really competent lobbyist.
So,
Okay.
Really competent.
And
He
it's a
was so
small.
confident that he didn't really track with the buffer bill.
Ours?
Yeah.
It was less about the actual buffer bill and more about how quickly the concept moved, and coupled with one of his other clients. And I'm take that back. The client piece came up with IIS. We didn't give him direction to do anything on the buffer bill when it first came up. Like we never did.
Did he bring anything to us?
You know, he did not. It was a gubernatorial. Dayton came up with the concept at a pheasant hunting at the pheasant opener.
Oh.
Like literally, he said it to a hot microphone, and that was the first anybody had heard of the concept. And then all of a sudden, things started moving, and so it was not something that was kind of brought up by any legislator, any interest group. So,
Different question, but one moment. Mr. Erdahl, we have Joel Carlson coming to one of our meetings fairly soon to give us a report, don't we?
I believe he was scheduled in May in the pending agenda. It could have been June.
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to be post-session, so.
So he will.
Unless there's a special session, then that's the, but I think he is in the next month or so. I think he was on the pending agenda
That's
list.
what I thought. Thank you. Mr. President.
so here's where we're at. I'm here, I'm giving you an update what my mob wants to do, give you an idea of the plan. The benefits is I think we'll get better, is I believe we will have better lobbying at the state than we do at the present time. 2, we can become a stronger organization and we can concentrate on really working
with our members outstate in terms of education of both the administrators and the managers so that they become better advocates for watershed management at this time. And I think those are the real purposes of it.
Manager Becker, thank you.
What's the search you did for the executive director, or did it?
We haven't done it yet. We won't do it until we get this thing approved.
What do you plan?
Assuming that we're going to start the search as soon after the 21st of June as we can. We really have avoided doing anything about it until we know that in fact we're going to go forward. Because we kind of would look foolish if we were lining up an administrator and then find out that we're going to fall flat in our face.
How do you go about soliciting applicants?
Well, we can post it on there's a number of boards that we can post it on. And, pardon?
And you will?
We will, yes. And the other thing is, I'm sure that I know that our administrators, who have written very strong letters to the MOD board saying, we want you to get an executive director, will get the word out as well. So I don't think it will take long for us to see some qualified people.
And you've expanded the role of associate members?
We've never had an associate member. What we want to do is we define the associate member better, and we want to go out and solicit them to come, one, because they become a revenue point of view, but that's then more organizations that are kind of doing the same thing we are. And I look at Bassett Creek as one, Mississippi WMO is another, the Carver one is the third. There are some WMOs out there that we would like to talk, and there are some watershed districts that frankly dropped out at one time or another because they didn't think they were getting any value for their money, and we want to get them back.
How do you ensure that associate members have interests that are congruent with the current membership?
I think we're going to have to talk to them and find out what their interests are and be sure that we cater to those things. You know, I hope that you come to the MOD convention in November and see the programs that we put on. We really make a great effort to educate people. In fact, we got to the point this year that we had 2 of our Citizens Advisory Committee members approach us saying, can we go to the MOD convention? And we said, sure, we'd like you to go. And we paid for them to go. For the whole time, we paid them their mileage, we paid for their accommodations and other things and got them there. They came back and they said, wow, we didn't know so much was going on there. And at the same time, they said, I got to tell you what, the Metro watershed districts are doing a whole lot better than what some of the outstate people are. But we have a really strong education program. Lewis does a wonderful program every year for new managers, telling everybody how to go through. He gives you a long speech on the ins and outs of the open meeting law, among other things, and he goes forward on that kind of basis. We have a lot of papers presented on new techniques that are being done by various watershed districts. So it's really a very, and I think anybody would benefit from those. I really do. I'm sorry I get enthused about those things because I'm just a nerdy guy with a master's degree and a part-time MBA type of thing, and I've gotten into science and the other way here, and I just enjoy going to hear about how alum treatments work, or how some of the other things that we're doing. Chloride, we're doing a project down in Lake Susan where we're running water through a spent lime treatment facility to get rid of the phosphorus out of it. So to learn all these things.
Reverse water softener.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, what we use is the stuff that the city of Eden Prairie uses. We use it for the other things. So anyway, there's a lot that happens there that I think WMOs could benefit from. So, and I can tell you our due structure, we know this, is significantly less than what the SWCDs are paying. But you look at it, they're getting more bang for the buck over there because they're the ones that are going to be really working the buffer bill, not us. But we need to. And I got to tell you what, buffer is not a good word in the Riley Purgatory Bluff Creek Watershed District. Lewis knows. He had to sit there with me when we had 400 people screaming at us that we were taking their property. So anyway, be that as it may. I've talked too long. I'm sorry.
Not at all. You made the papers that time.
Didn't want to.
Other questions for Perry?
Richard, you had good comments. Thank you.
So we will get the packet in May and
Yes.
be able to look at it and see the actual information. And
And you know where I hang out, so if you've got questions,
yep,
I'm happy to come again. I don't live far away.
thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. And it's always fun to come and see how another watershed district operates. So, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lars, I'll let you figure out how to get rid of this thing.
Yeah, Renee,
Anyway.
she'll figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Clark, item 12.2.
Managers, tonight I am here to review a proposed framework to conduct a Phase 2 environmental site assessment at 445 Brown Road in Orono. There's no action requested tonight. The board is just being presented this information as a matter of first review. It is intended to come back for final action later in May. I'm going to review kind of some work we did beginning back in 2010 with a feasibility study of the lower part of the Long Lake subwatershed, looking at issues and opportunities, and then evaluate kind of the MCWD's previous project implementation framework with how we do business today, and give you a status update of those previously identified projects, and then describe the partnership framework for this environmental site assessment. The Long Lake subwatershed includes the northern portion of Orono and part of Medina, which have two primary drainage tributaries to Long Lake, which is impaired. The district has previously constructed water quality improvements in that northern part of the watershed district, including water quality ponds, holds conservation easements, and has done alum treatment in Long Lake itself. The lower part of the watershed, which is the focus of tonight's discussion, included a 2010 feasibility study, which identified a series of projects in Long Lake Creek, which outlets from Long Lake to Tanager Lake of Lake Minnetonka, which is also impaired. The 2010 feasibility study identified a series of projects in Long Lake Creek, again from Long Lake to Tanager Lake, and the evolution of the projects in this area is a good example of the organization's evolution of capital project planning. Several of these projects that were identified, they were formally ordered, designed, and on hold while we were acquiring land rights to do the construction. Only one, the second star from Long Lake, the Long Lake Sewage Lagoon, proceeded, and that was due to a willing partner in the Metropolitan Council and the available lands to actually do the project. Through the Balanced Urban Ecology Policy, which was formalized in 2014, emphasizes the co-planning with communities and increasing the integration of our clean water work with land use change as it occurs. Technical solutions that were identified here are now becoming feasible, really due to the availability of lands. To review the status of these opportunities, starting at the top at the outlet of Long Lake, the district permitting program recently reviewed the construction permit for County Road 112, the old Wayzata Boulevard. The feasibility study identified creek restoration or stabilization of some steep eroded banks in that area. By providing technical assistance to Hennepin County through that permit review, the county has incorporated stabilization of those banks in that area. Moving down, the large wetland restoration site primarily included blocking flow in the ditch and spreading it out over the wetland. One of the primary landowners who has passed, the land is now in the holdings of YMCA, and the City of Orono in 2016 brought to us a sketch plan development for preliminary review of redevelopment. With that, staff has reached out to YMCA to talk about our interests in this site, and we will continue to coordinate with them through the permitting process as those plans someday come to fruition, and hopefully incorporate our clean water goals with site development there. And just to note, this type of informal coordination with the City of Orono and other communities in the district has really become part of normal practice with many of our communities, and the 2017 Comprehensive Plan LGU requirements highlight formal and informal frameworks as a requirement for LGUs, which staff will continue to develop with them over time, information sharing, site planning, etc. The subject property tonight is the lower one, 445 Brown Road. This site has an opportunity for the Watershed District really just to provide technical assistance as a grant applicant to do a Phase 2 environmental site assessment in exchange for conservation easement, or an option for that easement. The feasibility study identified remeander of Long Lake Creek around what is a former dump site, and the primary purpose of our interest here is reducing pollution risk downstream, improving habitat, and stabilizing this eroded creek. You can kind of see the existing creek channel through the middle of the parcel just to the left of the yellow line. That yellow line defines kind of the extent of the fill, which continues west from the historic dump site, which occurred for about 20 years and was identified in the Phase 1 as primarily household waste and construction debris, which was burned as well. So for the district to, sometime in the future conduct any restoration work here, as well as for the landowner to proceed with his development plans, a Phase 2 site assessment is needed. The district is eligible for Hennepin County grants for this purpose. It's the Brownfield Gap Financing Program. So the agreement in your packet tonight essentially says that the district would apply for these grant funds to facilitate the Phase 2 site assessment in exchange for an option for an easement that facilitates restoration work in the future if we so choose. The easement option at the end would come back with a staff recommendation based on what the environmental site assessment says for board consideration at that time. So again, no action is requested tonight. I just wanted to provide an overview and some context of some of the planning work in the Long Lake subwatershed and then this specific opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Manager Shackleton, is your question?
I was just gonna say, looking at Google Earth, it's amazing to see where the creek was. Like, it is so visible. And just how the ditch just cuts right in the middle of this big S shape.
Imagine if
Dish.
you had a LIBOR, that's what it's called,
LIDAR.
LIDAR, not LIBOR, that's a different thing.
So
Any other
that-
questions? Thank you, appreciate it.
So this is planned to come back for action in May.
The comprehensive plan update, Ms. Christopher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, managers. I just want to provide a brief update on the status of the plan and
when the board can expect to receive draft sections for review. Originally, I think the previous schedule I had presented before I went on leave had us getting authorization to release the plan for comment at tonight's meeting, so we're a little behind schedule, but still on track to meet our end of the year deadline. And so I'll just kind of walk through, I'm planning to send out the plan for review to the board and the CAC in 4 pieces, just so it's not too overwhelming to kind of get it all at once, and also then we're able to kind of send things as they're ready and give you more time for review. So the first piece would be that I plan to get out tomorrow is volume 2, which is, again, the data volume. This isn't one that I expect to be, of top interest or priority for the board or CAC, but still want to provide it so you are able to look through that as you desire. So that is in layout. There are still some kind of minor edits that we need to make to some of the maps and other things that have been flagged that will be done before it goes out, but it's pretty close to final. And then the next piece, which I'm targeting for 2 weeks out, on May 12th would be the executive summary, so volume 1. And this is currently being worked on by Smith Partners, and this includes an overview of plan structure, an overview of the district purpose, geography, governance structure, history, as well as an overview of the district philosophy and approach. And then finally, a summary of the implementation plan, so kind of what are the priority issues and priority actions. So that would be the next piece in 2 weeks. And for these other sections, aside from volume 2, we'll be sending just the text. It won't be in final layout until later. We just want to kind of get the content out to you to start reviewing. Then in 3 weeks, on the 19th, we're aiming to have the front end of volume 3, so everything except, this is the implementation plan volume, sending everything except the subwatershed plans. So that covers, again, kind of the philosophy and approach in more depth than what's in the executive summary, as well as program descriptions and then some of the required procedures. So local water plan review, kind of public process for CIP, plan amendments, those kinds of things. And then the final piece, which we're looking at 4 weeks out on the 26th, would be the subwatershed plans for review. And then finally on June, for the June workshop packet, is, if not sooner, is when we'd have it all combined and in layout, kind of final draft form. And then we'd be requesting authorization to release for comment on June 8th, so the June workshop.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Christopher?
Is this your first presentation since you've been on maternity leave?
It is.
Oh, I'm going to turn you into the Proud Parents Association for not having a picture of your child.
I got plenty. Yeah, my lovely coworkers posted up a bunch of pictures when I got back. So it's been nice.
Blame your coworkers.
Yeah. Wasn't.
I have a question. When you send this out, it's not going to crash our system. I don't know how much data there is in this.
Yeah, I'll have to think of what the best way is, or if the board has a preference. I was thinking we could share it through Dropbox, if that's preferable. I don't know what kind of works best in terms of how we share board packets. And
when I try to go to Dropbox, it says, we're working on this system or something.
Okay.
We're working on this program, so I don't know how to
Okay.
use Dropbox. But, yeah, and I'll break it up or something, but maybe test that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk to administration about kind of what the best way is and what they found with packets works best. And
Other questions? Thank you very much.
all right, thanks.
Let's add in at this point then, MOD delegates, summer meeting, special meeting delegates. Manager Olson and I have indicated a willingness to be delegates, and Manager Brogna said he'd have to be happy to be an alternate, so
I move
Was
the
there a
slate of
motion?
alternates and delegates and alternates.
the slate's
Do
moved.
they need
Is
to
there
be
a
ranked?
second?
Didn't seem like they had to be ranked.
I don't think so. There's a second for Manager Miller. Discussion, those in favor say aye.
The motion is that you two would be delegates and the would be alternate.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and then remember that we'll have to be sure we have a quorum on the 22nd, because 3 of us are going to be gone, or change that meeting. So we'll watch that closer to the time.
On the 22nd.
June.
Okay.
Mhm. Do I have the date right? I think so. Administrator's report, Mr. Erdahl.
Thank you, President White and managers. We had tell you, Mike, put a few show and tell type things in front of your spots here. One was she's gotten some great coverage for her hard work in terms of connecting with our local media folks, and so the 50 years of Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, and it links to all of the events that are planned coming up also. So it was a nice piece, and then after she brought some of those in, I saw on the Laker the top headline is the MCWD celebrates 50 years. And then following a week after she had coffee with a reporter from the Star Tribune, they had this article about the hospital joins Watershed District to build the flood wall, and that interviewed James Whisker for that article. So she's been doing a great job just getting a lot of pretty high profile and although not effort-free, she puts in the time to get those connections working, but it pays off. So, and in fact, the Laker is going to be doing some upcoming features focusing on the projects that are going to be coming up in the 6 Mile Halstead Bay project area, and then also an additional feature focus on the whole carp issue in that same sub-watershed. So those are some things that they're still kind of have in the works. This is some of the events that, again, are kind of in front of you here. We have some of the events starting on Saturday, the 29th. That's in 2 days, the storm drain stenciling project in Edina. May 4th, next Thursday, there's the Policymakers Evening event that's in Minneapolis. And I think you've all received some information about that. And then also following the May 6th, there's a kids fishing clinic that's being hosted at Lord Fletcher's that we're part of as well. One other kind of update from the communications and education staff is that the vacancy that had been created when Trevor left that staff is being filled. There's a lot of great applicants for that role, and Sarah Bimani starts on Monday as her first day. So we'll welcome her next week. Also, I had a couple updates from some of the things in the planning and project staff. One is that the Arden Park concept design official notice, and there's a public meeting this coming Monday evening, the 1st in Edina. So if anyone is interested in attending that, I can send out pass those down the way here. And if you have any questions on that, Renee is coordinating some of those things. The Bushway Road project, that's been a long ongoing project. I understand from Renee also that they were seeding those vertical vegetated walls today, and so they'll get some good growth in there, and I think some seeds were coming up, or some plants were coming up from some of the seeding that was done last fall. So we're getting pretty close to closing out our work on that project, which is nice. And then also James wanted to talk about a couple items with, I think you forwarded those, didn't you, with the Bowser performance-based grant funding? Maybe you forgot about that one. And then there's also one that will be coming up later with Riley Purgatory boundary change, but that will be coming up a little bit later too. Then he sent those to me a few days ago, so maybe that was a lifetime ago if you're working on budgets and comprehensive plans.
The performance-based funding thing, we can provide the board a memo. There's no time-sensitive or urgent, but the Board of Water and Soil Resources has been holding some listening sessions as they, I guess I'll come up and the Board of Water and Soil Resources has been holding some listening sessions regarding how they disperse the Clean Water Legacy funding, and I think the nuts and bolts of it is they're trying to reduce the administrative burden. There's a lot of overhead associated with reviewing all of the applications that come in. There are more applications than there are funding pretty routinely. And they're also looking at making the funding mirror some of the other funding sources that we talked about earlier in Planning and Projects Committee, where they're available on more of a larger project more programmatic basis. And they're exploring different ways of administering those funds at various watershed scales. And so they presented a bunch of different options that we can lay out and summarize. But they're not advancing any of those right now. It's mainly just been information gathering. So I'm sorry I forgot and don't have better context or more info, but we'll pull it together and put it in the next board packet.
Okay. Mr. Smith?
I think one of the issues that was, the way this was initially presented was that in the metro area, a lot of this relates to the broad statewide approach of one watershed, one plan, and the desire to have the Bowser Clean Water Funds flow on a watershed basis. But in the metro area,
Right.
one watershed, one plan isn't really relevant. So they've talked about the money flowing to the counties instead, which I don't think has been universally well received. And so I know there's been more discussion at the listening sessions, but I would just flag it as something that's important for the district to attend to.
Good. We'll
Right,
look
yeah,
forward.
none of the sessions, I think that have been attended, there's been a lot of support for it going through the county structure through SWCDs, and obviously we raised the point that in Hennepin County there isn't a soil and water conservation district. And they also recognize, I mean, because we don't have, the reason one watershed, one plan doesn't apply is there's already a separate planning framework for the metro that's quite robust, that layers and supposed to connect all of the various agency plans. So they've laid out 2 or 3 other options for how they can mirror the funding that they're trying to set up for one watershed, one plan to fit the metro. And I don't think any of the schemes, in my opinion, any of the schemes that they've laid out would work particularly well. At the last listening session I attended at MWMO, it came up, Doug Snyder and I were talking to Bowser about the Public Facilities Authority grant and how they establish a project priority list, and that in the metro, the capital improvement programs are known, out for a number of years, and that many of the metro watersheds, just like us, are developing sort of an integrated or funding plan for their CIP, and that they should look at funding multiple years. And so we'll have to kind of track that and come back to the board with more info.
Okay, thank you. That's the end.
That's all.
At this point, then, we are going to go into a closed session for a continuation of the performance review conducted in February.
How we adjourn?
Do we?
Pardon?
We go into closed session, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
We're going to go into closed session.
Yes.
So we don't need to adjourn?
Don't need to
We didn't, we recessed our
It was
personnel
the
committee.
executive